Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is heading to Washington, D.C. today for crucial trade negotiations with President Donald Trump, marking their second face-to-face meeting since Carney became Prime Minister.
Canadian companies to, quotes, relocate back to the United States, he said, and also he said filling the U.S. Treasury with new revenues, reducing the deficit. So I think, I think you never know which Donald Trump you're going to get. He likes to be the deal maker, but if you look at everything he has done and said with respect to the Canadian trade relationship since winning the last election, he seems to have a particular animosity almost towards this trade relationship. It's clear from Jameson Greer, the U.S. trade representative, that they're trying to split Canada and Mexico apart as we move towards renegotiation of USMCA. So I think the Prime Minister is walking into a very difficult and frankly volatile situation.
Potentially hostile. You know, you say that there seems to be some particular animosity. Why do you say that, and why do you think that is?
Well, there's a lot of different theories, but, let's look at it from what appears to be Trump's perspective. He actually seems to believe that Canada was part of this unfair global economy that was stealing manufacturing jobs from the United States. I mean, the truth is, of course, we've had highly integrated economies that the U.S.
The stakes couldn't be higher for Canada's economy. American tariffs have already doubled on key Canadian industries, with steel and aluminum facing 50% tariffs, softwood lumber hit with 10% tariffs percent, and furniture and cabinets facing 25% increases. These measures have cost 86,000 Canadian jobs and are threatening to push Canada's already fragile economy into recession. At the heart of this trade dispute lies what Trump calls a natural business conflict. The United States wants the same things Canada wants: thriving steel and automotive industries.
Well, it's a complicated agreement, more complicated maybe than any other agreement we have on trade, because, we have natural conflict. We also have mutual love. We have great love for each other. I love this. I love Canada and the people of Canada, and Mark feels the same way about here. The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, meaning the U.S. wants a car company, and they want steel and we want steel. So in other countries, they're very far away, and there's no problem. You can compete and you can do. We don't like to compete because we sort of hurt each other when we compete, and so we have a natural conflict. It's a natural business conflict. Nothing wrong with it, and I think we've come a long way over the last few months, actually, in terms of that relationship. So when it comes to trade, the United States was always giving everything. They gave everything to Canada. They would let car companies leave here and go to Canada. But
both countries are competing for the same companies, the same investments, and the same economic opportunities. Despite their mutual friendship, the proximity creates unique challenges.
I think the November 5th election was a big factor, and I think the tariffs are a big factor. And again, we want Canada to do great, but there's a point at which we also want the same business. We're competing for the same business. That's the problem. That's why I keep mentioning one way to solve that problem is a very easy way. But we're competing for the same business. He wants to make cars, we want to make cars, and we're in competition. And the advantage we have is we have this massive market. So it's it's quite an advantage.
Mr. President, can we talk about Portland for a second? Are you planning to invoke the Insurrection Act? That would be, a very long-standing law that's been on the books.
Yeah, well, it's been invoked before, as you know. If you look at Chicago, Chicago's a great city where there's a lot of crime.
As Trump explained, when distant countries compete, it's different. But when neighbors compete, they inevitably hurt each other in the process. Carney arrives in Washington with a notably different approach than his initial promises. His earlier pledge to secure a comprehensive trade deal by July 21st has given way to a more conciliatory tone, representing a dramatic shift from his earlier confrontational stance.
Well, I think it hasn't been abrupt. I think we saw some of that very early on into the Carney mandate when he initially met with President Trump at the White House that first time. And certainly through the course of the G7, where he was heaping on praise onto the U.S. president for his quote unquote leadership on the world stage. That marks another pivot. And I'm using the word pivot or change, and that's probably like a generous way of describing it. I think there are two ways to look at this. If you're the Liberals, you're saying, okay, look, this was necessary. This is obviously what's required to be able to land at a better outcome for Canada. If you're the Conservatives and people who support them, you're saying, wait a second. This is not the bag of goods that you sold us during the campaign. You positioned yourself as someone who could be best suited to stand up to Donald Trump, not to offer effusive praise on multiple occasions and ultimately come home with tariffs that were very punishing tariffs that remain on sectors. And we saw some evidence during question period today of
The Prime Minister has already made significant concessions, rolling back counter tariffs and abandoning the digital services tax, moves that opposition leaders criticize as weakening Canada's negotiating position. During today's meeting, negotiators will focus on three critical sectors: steel, aluminum, and energy. Minister Carney has identified these as areas where quick agreements could benefit both nations, marking the first step in broader trade negotiations between the two nations.
Are amongst the ones that have faced the most significant challenges from the 232 tariffs. And in the conversation today, we talked about ways to quickly arrive at a deal that will bring, we hope, a better circumstance to both countries in these sectors of significant importance. That would be obviously the first step that we hope to conclude quickly in what would then be a conversation that would allow us to make progress on other sectors as well. Alors, en français, nous avons...
The aluminum situation is particularly pressing, as approximately 75% of aluminum used in American manufacturing comes from Canada, driving up costs for American manufacturers who rely on these materials.
Well, if it's true, it certainly represents a breakthrough. You have to remember in context that we have the lowest tariff rates in the world at about 5%. That's because most of the products which cross the border are CUSMA compliant. The problem is that there are some exceptions which the United States have carved out that are at 50%, and that includes steel and aluminum. And for those particular industries, they're being really hard done by. But we have reason to believe that the United States is suffering as well from the steel and aluminum tariffs. In the case of aluminum, probably close to 75% of the aluminum used in the United States comes from Canada, which is really accelerating the cost for a lot of commodities within the United States and putting pressure on the government to find a compromise. So it wouldn't be surprised if there was some movement on those two commodities.
The economic uncertainty created by these tariff threats extends beyond the immediate impact of the duties themselves. Canadian businesses report that the unpredictability is deterring investment, with potential partners questioning Canada's future stability. Rather than navigating complex cross-border arrangements, companies are choosing to work directly with the United States instead.
And I like Mark, and he'll say all those lovely platitudes, but he's also going to point out once again that Canadian economy is hurting and that he's stealing business from us. And the reason why that is so difficult for us in Canada is it introduces uncertainty into investment in Canada. It's not just the tariffs, Vashi, that are hurting us. It's the fact that other companies are saying, what's next for you guys up there? What else is he going to do to you? And quite frankly, the risk associated with the uncertainty around Canada, we may as well just work with the United States directly. And that's the kind of impact it's having now. It's not just on the tariff industries, it's on everything that you could possibly think about. Just like the announcement today, 25% on medium and heavy duty trucks going into the United States. Tom Mulcair kindly explained to me what that was before we actually came to air. Before that, I didn't even know it was a possibility. So, expect the unexpected, but serious meeting. Trump's going to use it for his own purposes, and he's also going to try to spank us on foreign policy, tomorrow being October 7, which is a very difficult day for a lot of people in this world.
I think to Lisa's point, Tom, right? Like even you heard in those comments from Trump, they just happened right before we went.
Provincial leaders are growing increasingly frustrated with the federal government's approach. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has emerged as a vocal critic, warning that Canada cannot continuously back down to escalating tariff increases.
We buy a tremendous amount of furniture off the U.S. and as well as cabinets, but we also ship cabinets down to the U.S. But we can't just keep rolling over to President Trump. As he strengthens his case, we seem to be weakening our case by continuously pulling off tariffs. I'd take a different approach. Try to get a deal. If you can't, we got to hit him back hard and never stop hitting him back hard, because we can never take a back seat to anyone, especially President Trump. We have a great country, resilient country, a powerful economically, we're powerful. The U.S. exports more products to Canada than anywhere in the entire world. And it sounds great with the Americans until they start seeing inflation. We've seen inflation down in the U.S. I just came back from a meeting in Quebec with 2 governors. They're seeing inflation. We're seeing it in sectors. The auto sector, you know, they're going to see an increase of over $107 billion. Other companies are seeing it. John Deere, they're laying over 280 people off because of tariffs. We're seeing it across every single sector. So it's time to sit down, let's get a deal, or let's start hitting back.
He advocates for a stronger stance, arguing that if negotiations fail, Canada must be prepared to retaliate rather than simply absorbing economic punishment. Ford uses a stark analogy to describe the current situation, comparing it to a schoolyard where a student gets punched in the face every day by a bully. It's time to hit back, Ford argues, rather than bowing down.
Sure don't sit back and get beat up by a bully every single day. It's like a kid going to the schoolyard and getting punched in the face every day. It's time to hit back if he can't get a deal. Maybe Prime Minister Carney knows something I don't know. And if that's the case, he should sit down with the premiers and explain that. My message is very clear to Howard Lutnick. You know, this is not going to work. I got an idea, Howard. Look up Ronald Reagan. Take a look at what he said about tariffs. What it does, it increases inflation, which is happening in the U.S. and Canada. And at the end of the day, people start losing their jobs. So why don't we partner together and come up with a solution and stop attacking Canadians? We have 2 choices, folks. You sit back and let Trump run the country, roll us over, and we bow down to the guy. That's not what Doug Ford believes. We sit there and fight like we've never fought before.
He emphasizes that while both countries will suffer from a prolonged trade war, Canada cannot afford to appear weak in these negotiations. Political analysts express deep skepticism about today's meeting producing meaningful results. Many observers have extremely low expectations for any breakthrough, expecting Canada will likely take what the U.S. gives us.
Very low likelihood that there's going to be a deal coming out of this meeting. I think it's extremely low. And any notion that there's going to be a good deal at the end of this for Canada, I think has been dispelled over the past number of months as we've seen what's happened with other countries, frankly. There isn't a tariff-free option, and I think available to Canada in terms of this negotiation. We're gonna take what the U.S. gives us. I think is sort of the what we should be looking at, because that's sort of how it's gone for everyone else. I think the big question will be like the customs negotiations. That's not going to be settled. You know, we've essentially have 0 tariffs in all but the steel, aluminum, and obviously auto. Softwood lumber. So those sector-specific ones are bad, but we're running with the lowest tariffs of anyone in the world for everything else. I just don't think that's bound to last. I think CUSMA is not going to go as well as it did last time, and I see no path for that being settled at this meeting.
The concern is that Carney has already given away significant leverage without securing corresponding benefits, leaving him with limited negotiating tools. Meanwhile, Trump continues to tout his administration's economic achievements, claiming over $17 trillion in investment commitments to the United States in just 8 months, compared to less than $1 trillion during the previous administration. He predicts this figure will reach $20 to $22 trillion, calling it unprecedented in world history and attributing it to his administration's policies.
If we didn't win this election, if we had these people that were running, that were ruining our country, destroying our country with their open borders and men playing in women's sports and transgender from everybody and windmills all over the place, if we allowed that to go on for another couple of years, we would be, I'm not sure that we'd even have a country. Yeah, Brian. And by the way, I'm not sure we would have even had a country. And now we have the most successful country in the world. Brian?
Yes, sir. What is your message to Democrats ahead of a next vote to open up the government? The American people are saying, open the damn government. What's your message to them right now?
Well, they're the ones that started it. They're the ones that have it. And it's almost like a kamikaze attack by them. You want to know the truth? This is like a kamikaze attack. They almost, they have nothing to lose. They've lost the elections. They've lost the presidential election in a landslide. I saw the other day where Kamala said this was a very...
As the meeting approaches, Trump has offered cryptic hints about the outcome. When asked what Canada might receive in return for concessions, he simply said, "You'll find out," but added optimistically that the people of Canada will love us again. This suggests he may be considering some form of tariff relief, hinting at possible relief on steel and aluminum tariffs without providing specifics.
As Trump said at the end of those joint comments, I think you're going to be very happy. And I'm wondering if that was a possible hat tip to what we expected to be a reprieve on steel and aluminum tariffs. Do you think he's hinting at something there?
Well, Carolyn, if only I knew what Donald Trump was hinting at, I certainly would be rolling around in bags of money right now. But unfortunately, I have no way to discern exactly what he means. There's a couple of things that he did say, though. I mean, you're right to point to tariffs, right? Because that's the immediate relief that Canada is looking for.
The broader context of these negotiations involves the upcoming renegotiation of the CUSMA trade agreement. Whatever emerges from today's meeting will set the tone for those more comprehensive talks. With Canada's economy potentially already in recession and facing massive deficits from previous spending, the country has limited room to maneuver in absorbing further economic shocks. For Canadian workers in affected industries, from sawmills to auto plants to aluminum smelters, today's meeting represents a critical moment. Their livelihoods hang in the balance as their Prime Minister attempts to navigate between securing immediate relief and preserving Canada's long-term trade interests. The fundamental challenge remains unchanged. Two neighboring countries with deep economic ties and genuine friendship find themselves locked in competition for the same economic prizes. How this paradox gets resolved will shape North American trade relations for years to come.